Recession talk is everywhere right now, and you even have the president of the United States saying that a recession might actually be worth the cost. Yeah, that did actually happen. But here's the thing. Are we in a recession right now? And what is a recession? What is the actual definition of it? And what are the chances that we are going to go in recession if we're not in one right now? Let's go ahead and break it down. There are a few things that we do need to discuss. Again, the definition, the chances, and then what do we need to be on the lookout in case we're not in a recession currently, and then what do we do to protect ourselves. But first, let's just quickly address the strange elephant in the room. Okay, regardless of political party, y'all know I try not to get into that, at least on this here channel, is this. You can't, no, first off, recessions are not good for anybody, any political party, whatever. That is not fun. I don't root for them. I try not to predict them because there's always somebody out there saying there's going to be a recession every single year. Okay, and it's not going to be a prediction of a recession, though I am going to give you the chances based on an article, not me, based on an article. But you can't say that if I'm not elected, there's going to be a recession, and then get elected and then say that there's going to be a recession and it's actually going to be worth it. That doesn't make sense. You let me know that actually does not make sense. All right, I'm gonna just throw that out there. But here's the main thing. A recession is a contraction of the economy. The way that we measure this is called gross domestic product. That is the value of the stuff that we produce. For example, let's say you produce 100 chairs and you sell them for $100, and then the next quarter, and you need 2 consecutive quarters of contraction. Okay, so the first quarter you produce 100 chairs, and then the next quarter you produce $95 worth of chairs. So $100 worth of chairs in quarter one, $95 worth of chairs in quarter two, and let's just say quarter three you produce $80 worth of chairs. The value of the chairs that you're producing less, starts to go down. There's a contraction of the value of stuff, your GDP. That is how it works. That is the classical textbook definition. However, as we have all learned, and if you stayed awake in economics class, I had to get a degree in it. I guess I didn't have to, but that is the path I chose in life. But the Economic Bureau of Research, if I got that correct, the National Bureau of Economic Research is the official body that declares things a recession. If they don't say it, it ain't there, okay? Regardless of what any president says or person, it is not my job to declare it. It is their job. Okay, if they don't say it, it ain't there. Okay, even if you have that contraction, that is because they count additional factors, including unemployment, consumer spending, and other factors. Okay, so those other things need to happen. For example, we have seen contraction, and we've had tiny bits of contraction, but unemployment was fine, spending was fine, and they said, hey, yes, we see the contraction, but everybody's still employed, everybody's still spending, inflation is high, but this is not a recession, which makes sense. But in 2008, people were unemployed. The economy did contract. We're going to call this a recession. Go back to COVID era. Economy did absolutely contract. Unemployment was sky high. Okay, we're going to call this a recession. Currently, today, we don't have that, and we do not have an answer, and we might not have an answer until July. Why is that the case? We're not done with the first quarter. We don't know that, and we might not know again until July because we need quarter one and we need that data, and then we're going to need quarter two and we need that data. Now, while I might not be the most optimistic person in the world, things could improve. They could also get worse, but they could improve, and we just need things to play out just a bit more, and they need that time to digest and understand that data, and then they're going to put out whatever information that we get at that point in time. Currently, though unemployment has ticked up just a bit, it is still contextually low, okay, right around that 4%, which isn't all that bad, and spending has slowed just a bit, but it's solid, okay. Unemployment. Inflation is not great, especially for eggs, but it is still relatively low. It's in the 2% range, but it is still not where the Fed wants it, which is something we've been talking about before. But it is not at the 9% that it was in the previous administration. So it has consistently come down, but still not where anybody prefers it. Gas prices have come down. So things are better, but still nowhere near where they were when people claimed and thought and really felt like a recession. We called it a vibe session, and we did a whole video about the vibe session, what people were thinking and feeling at that point in time. So today, no, we're not in a recession. However, why are people saying it so much right now, and why does the stock market tell us that? And why does the stock market feel and make us think recession all the time, especially when it falls by 10% and it is a correction? That is because people like to say, whether it's true or not, we're going to get into that, but that's because we see that as a future predictor. We call that a leading indicator. So there are some problems with that. The reason why we call that is because, number one, the stock market is reactionary, sometimes emotional, sometimes too emotional when it comes to the stock market, but we get to gauge what the stock market can do and what the value of it is almost instantly every single day, at least Monday through Friday, right? And also, they tell us what is going on every single quarter, and almost daily we can find this information. But also, take a company like a Walmart, like a McDonald's, companies that are consumer focused, and we know that 60 to 70% of our economy is based on consumer spending. These consumer companies are going to tell us, hey, spending is slowing down. People aren't spending money with us. And we start looking at consumer companies across the board, and we see spending come down. Throw in Amazon with this as well, and we say, nobody's spending money in this category. Nobody's spending money here. People are saving more money, and they're going to O'Reilly Automotives. They are preparing for a recession. They're holding on to their cars. They're not buying new cars. They're not buying Teslas. They're not buying Fords. They're not buying anything. What if this is a recession and people pour their money from the market? Everybody panic. The reason why it can be true is because, yes, that data is there, but also the market can be emotional at times. Going back to 2022, we did have 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, but 2022 was not a recession. We had high inflation, but unemployment was okay. Unemployment was fine, and spending was fine, though the market fell. You can go back to all the headlines from 2022, all the vibeflation or the vibe session stuff, but if you continue to buy during that time, you'd have a lot more money today, and the market just did not match with what the reality was, which is why you don't always want to use the market to predict the economy. Those are 2 separate things. The stock market just tells us what we think is going to happen with companies, whereas the economy really has to do with us, with you, how you spend, what is going on with the housing market, what is going on with inflation, and a lot of international trade and government and a lot of other things. Whereas companies are you going to be more profitable now? What's going to happen with tax rates and strategy and decisions? They are quite separate, even though some people want to conflate those two. So yeah, the stock market can be down. Yes, it can be in correction territory or not, but those 2 things are not equal. The market can be down 20% and it not be a true recession. This literally happened just 3 years ago. Now, moving on to the next one is this. What are the chances of recession or of a recession in 2025? Depends on who you ask. You can ask traders, you can ask economists. According to an article by CNBC, they are saying that it is up to 40%. There are 2 ways, though, that you can look at this. You can say that chances doubled because it was 20% and it jumped to 40. That's not great. Or you can say that is a 60% chance that there will be no recession. We obviously know, I think it is obvious, that we know that this is due to uncertainty, that it is due to tariffs, and the instability and unpredictability of policies that are out there, whether it's from Congress or from the administration. And I think those concerns are fair. It's not just the general public, but also from CEOs, whether CEOs from Walmart and other consumer companies have said, we don't know how to plan for this, and it is causing us concern for how to hire and how to manage these specific costs. So that is something that we do need to be aware of. Also, it doesn't actually make a ton of sense because if you cut spending, right, we've talked about Doge a little bit here, but if you cut spending and try to replace that with tariffs, if you remove those tariffs and you already cut spending, then how are you going to replace that money? that is a concern because we don't expect those tariffs to remain forever. If they do, that means that costs for us are going to remain forever, and that's not good. But we're supposed to be using these tariffs as a bargaining chip, which means you give us what we want and we take the tariffs away. We take the tariffs away. We need that money because we cut spending, we cut taxes in other places. So something's not adding up, and Doge has not cut enough to balance those things. There's a lot of math issues with Doge. You want me to cover more about Doge and whether or not the receipts are correct? Let me know, because there are some issues there. So cutting taxes, implementing tariffs, there's a gap there. There's some real mathematical issues that we should probably cover there. So that is a part of it. However, how are you going to get ahead of a recession, and how can you, I'm not going to say be accurate in your prediction, however, but there is something that you can be aware of and should be aware of. The biggest thing, and we've probably mentioned this before, is consumer spending. Yes, unemployment is extremely important, but again, if people are unemployed, then they're likely not going to spend as much, right? So keep your eye on consumer spending. This is something that is reported. We do talk about this from time to time, and trust me, if it starts to drop, we will talk about it as well. And then some companies talk about it too. But keep your eye, again, on consumer spending. If that starts to drop significantly, that is something that is going to continue to reflect in the stock market, and that is something that will be an indicator of whether or not we enter into a recession. If we get there and we start to get close to a recession, you are going to need some things to protect yourself and get ready for what may be down the line. If you want to know what those things are, I give some excellent tips, and those tips are right here.